Hi all, it's Thursday again and the Hammer of Truth, Honour and Integrity show, and tonight's date is February the 8th. Hi all and welcome to another week of the Truth, Honour and Integrity. That was going out to the Penguin people up north in America. Lee, Holly, Glenn, Hilly are all complaining it's a bit snowy up there, so it's a bit cold. Here it's kind of mild, 76 degrees, and I think we have a show. May not be as exciting as last week with the announcement last week, which has obviously generated some interest, and we'll have more details on that. And this is now the fifth show in 7 days, so, and more to come, no doubt, once it all gets fully verified, even though it has been. Right, so let's get into the show. And I'm going to spend more time answering questions because we've kind of neglected that over the last few weeks with so much being put in. So there'll be more time for questions tonight and less op-ed pieces. Right, email for the show if you want to send questions in and you're not on the Facebook or MeWe page. Please post all your questions for the show if you're on those sites on the pinned show post, so it's easier for the admins to pick them up. But if you are not on those two pages, you can send an email, truth.honour.and.integrity@gmail.com, and the links for the show is www.spreaker.com/user/8955881. And we have the articles website that has all the archives, all the bigger shows. For those of you who are joining the show new and need to get an idea of what this show's all about, go and look at the bigger shows we've done. There's about 9 or 10 there, and it covers a gamut of subjects. And it has the live link and all the archives of the previous shows, including the couple of extra ones I did this week. So that's thinkdifferent.thepeoplesclub.org, and there's articles of self-empowerment and all kinds on there, and shadow sides and inner work and chakra work, breathing work. So there's a lot of help on that site. And if you don't like Facebook, which many are now getting rather tired of, we have a social media alternative called MeWe.com. And that's on the Truth, Honour and Integrity. I believe people have difficulty finding it, except the link is posted on every show post, whether it's on MeWe or Facebook. Just go to the top of the page and copy and paste. And we have the People's Club donation website link, all about the foundation when it gets funded, and the People's Club, that's at thepeoplesclub.org. Right, let's get into some news. We do have some intel, and I'm going to give some explanations and a few bits for people to ponder on. But there's a lot of fun and games going on at the moment. That obviously there's certain elements who are not happy of last week's declaration being verified, and some people are picking the ball up and running. Thankfully there's been no damage to date. But let's get on with some news items and then we'll get into the rest of it. Federal Reserve Chairperson Janet Yellen will begin work Monday as a distinguished fellow, really. All that failure at the Hutchins Center on Fiscal and Monetary Policy in the Brookings Institute in Washington, D.C. In heading to Brookings, Yellen followed in the footsteps of former Federal Reserve Chairman Ben Bernanke and former Vice Chairman Donald Cohn, along with former top Fed staffer Nellie Liang. Yellen, who is 71, spent 17 years in the Federal Reserve, including 4 as chair, 4 as vice chair, 3 as Federal Reserve governor, and 6 as San Francisco federal president. And her term ends this week. And for now, Jerome Powell is to be sworn in on Monday. I don't think that will last much longer, but time will tell. And apparently the Hutchins Centre said it seeks to improve the quality and efficiency of fiscal and monetary policies and the public understanding of them. Then why did you appoint Janet Yellen? The questions have to be asked. They obviously don't want to learn too much then. There's 17 years of fiscal failure in the Federal Reserve. I'm not too sure she's going to add too much, but it seems it gets you a highly paid job in their world. Failure. Now this is a story from the UK. It's a couple of interest. And of course we're facing shutdown again. I'll have more of that later. But Britain's got its own shutdown going on, and the Government Services Agency was declared, Carillion I think the name was, declared bankrupt a couple of weeks ago. And this is what's happening in the UK in some of the councils. The leader of a council was forced to ban almost all spending, she said, and warned the government the authority was about to fall over the edge of the cliff. This particular council is Northamptonshire County Council, said on Friday it had brought in Section 114 notice banning all new expenditure. So this is we provide health service to the elderly, the disabled and the children. As per usual, it's those 3 vulnerable groups that suffer while the clowns just carry on collecting their pay. And Heather Smith, Conservative council leader, said it was the perfect storm of increases in demand for services and reductions in government funding. We did warn that we would become unstable, and she said we've been warning the government from about 2013 and 14 onwards with regards to our financial position. We couldn't cope with the levels of cuts we were facing. Before Christmas, she had wrote to the Secretary of State in the UK to say that we're about to fall off the edge of the cliff because we just can't increase council taxes anymore. We've been in what you might call a perfect storm of huge increases in demands for our services at the same time as significant reductions in funding from central government. This has been an ongoing problem in the UK for numbers of years. They've been cutting back the social services whilst increasing the population. So of course what happens next is the public then blame the increase in population from people from other countries. No, that's what they want you to believe. The problem is the misspending and deliberate lowering of people's life standards, in my opinion. It's a part of a social program where they just lower everyone's lifestyle, makes everyone sick. Then they take backhanders from Big Pharma. It's the way it works. Hopefully, going forward, all that nonsense will stop. But, you know, the people have paid their taxes, are entitled to services and proper services at that. You know, for those in America, you'll be maybe unaware that people say the NHS is, or National Health Service is free. It's not. It's 12-13% comes out of your wages every week. 12 to 13%. So it's hardly free. A Russian ground attack aircraft was shot down. This is a area is of particular concern. I've been warning about it long enough, and the Caliphate area. and the Russian jet was shot down in a rebel-held area in Syria's northwestern province of Idlib. And the Russian Defense Ministry said the pilot had ejected into the area believed to be controlled by the jihadist group Hayat Tahrir al-Sham Alliance, Sham being the operative word. Although he survived the crash, he was killed on ground fight. Sad that. Survived a jet crash and then only to be killed on the ground. Unbelievable. The Hayat Tahrir al-Sham group is formally linked to Al-Qaeda, so you know who operates them, and said it had shot down the plane. It's funny how all these so-called terrorists are so honest and admit to what they've done. I wish politicians were that honest. In fact, I wish all people were that honest. It would be a much better world. The Syrian government, backed by Russian air power, launched a major offensive in December against the rebel groups in Idlib. And, of course, now Turkey's involved. And the Turkish military, which is linked to this, had suffered the deadliest day in its offensive against Kurdish militias inside northern Syria, with 7 soldiers killed at the weekend. 5 of them died when their tank was attacked in the Afrin region, and the PM Binali Yildirim vowed to make the militias pay for this twice as much, and jets later struck Kurdish targets in the northeast of the city of Afrin. Now, Turkey's operation was called Olive Branch, was launched on January the 20th to drive the Kurdish YPG militia out of Afrin. And Turkey views the YPG group as a terrorist group and also an extension of the banned Kurdistan Workers' Party, PKK, which has fought for Kurdish autonomy in, go figure, southeastern Turkey. So you got the northwest of Syria and southeastern Turkey. Go and look it up on the map. I've been talking about it long enough and why they're still fighting in those particular regions. Oh, Pentagon. Well, at least they've been audited. That's a move forward. Perhaps a sign of things to come. The Pentagon Defense Logistics Agency is reported to not be able to document hundreds of millions of dollars of money it spent. An internal audit by Ernst & Young finds the agency cannot account for more than $800 million in construction projects. Halliburton, Bechtel. And according to Politico, who did the report, the audit raises concerns about how the Defence Department handles its $700 billion annual budget. And in a statement, the agency also said it's the first of its size and complexity in the Department of Defence to undergo an audit, so we did not anticipate achieving a clean audit opinion in the initial cycles. And the key is to use auditor feedback to focus on remediation efforts and corrective action plans and maximise the value from the audits. Indeed. And the report comes as the Trump administration is poised to ask Congress for $716 billion for defence spending for the fiscal year 2019. A major hike that budget analysts say aligns with the administration's stated goals of bulking up the military and preparing it for potentially fight near peer rivals after years of focusing on terrorism. And, my opinion on military, I think I've said enough. But President Trump did come into office pledging to rebuild what he describes as a depleted military. I wonder, does he realise, well, I presume he does, that the military is depleted because certain people at the top end decided to sell all the military equipment. And yet no one's heads has rolled for that. We reported this a month or so ago, and they had 90 days. Apparently now it's down to 30. And Israel has begun warning thousands of African migrants on Sunday that they must leave by the end of March, under a plan that could see them jailed if they refuse. On January the 3rd, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu announced implementation of a plan to deport about 38,000 migrants who had entered the country illegally, according to them, mainly Eritreans and Sudanese. Say nothing about Israel illegally being on Palestinian land, but that's for another day. The controversial plan gives them until the end of next month to leave voluntary or face jail and eventual expulsion. And the Immigration Authority spokeswoman Sabine Haddad told AFP that officials began issuing migrant letters on Sundays, advising they had 60 days or less in which to leave the country voluntary. But for now, the notices are being given only to men without families, and the authority is offering those, to be fair, they are offering those to leave a grant of $3,500 and a flight ticket and help with obtaining travel documents. That's one way of at least helping people, as most of these people have got no money. But should they not leave by the deadline, the grant would be reduced and enforcement measures would be taken against them and anyone employing them. Not good. Where are we next? Chile. And the Pope, a victim of a pedophile priest in Chile, has revealed he wrote to the Pope about an alleged cover-up after Pope Francis denied getting any evidence. Go figure. Juan Carlos Cruz, a victim of cleric Fernando Caradima in the 1980s, accused fellow priest Juan Barros of witnessing the abuse and doing nothing. The Pope caused outrage after a visit in Chile last month by defending Bishop Barros, who was made bishop in 2015, and the Vatican, when challenged by the BBC, refused to comment on the letter. No change there then. Polish President Andrzej Duda said on Tuesday that he will sign a contested Holocaust bill into law. Despite protests from Israel and the United States, the measure imposes prison sentences of up to 3 years for mentioning the term Polish death camps and for suggesting publicly and against the facts that the Polish nation or state was complicit in Nazi Germany's crimes. Poland's right-wing government says the law is necessary to protect the reputation of the Polish people as victims of Nazi aggression. But Israel says the law would ban true statements about the role that some Poles played in Nazi crimes. Yeah. What about Mr. Begin and the role he played when they were offered to remove all Jewish people out of the camps in 1942, along with, in a meeting with, who was it? I think it was Hitler, and it was certainly Churchill. And Mr. Begin refused because the Germans wanted to put them into Palestine, and they wanted their own state. So he left his own people in the camps, and the Germans wanted rid of them. So, yeah, it's history has a way of catching up with you, it seems. But it seems rather odd that this Holocaust, there's been many Holocausts throughout the world. The Russian one, 19 million. The unknown Holocaust, and no one ever talks about it. But, whilst it was sad, so many people died, and it wasn't all Jews that died in those camps either. There was a lot of Poles that died. But this is the nature of war, and why we have to change this mindset of the criminal banking elite and the bloodline families who's got an obsession with war because it creates profits and culls the herd, according to them. Here's another culling of the herd, and I'm hoping by reading this out that something can be done about this, and the awareness made is that other countries will catch on to what they're up to. Because this is Agenda 21, right in your face. Raila Odinga, who swore himself in as the president of Kenya this week, has claimed their tests have proven the government's tetanus vaccine has sterilised hundreds of thousands of women and children. The tetanus vaccine. So I know a friend of mine who I did the show with last week, Ben, Pam, he had a tetanus, so I'm afraid you can't have any more kids, Ben. Sorry. Anyway, a state-sponsored forced sterilisation on a massive scale has allegedly taken place in Africa, according to opposition leaders and the public, who are railing against the government. An industrial pharmaceutical laboratory has since had its licence suspended by the Kenya Accreditation Service as a result of the controversy. Kenya's opposition leader Odinga, who swore himself in as president last Tuesday, claimed that at least 500,000 young girls and women may be infertile following a tetanus vaccine administered by the government in 2014 through 2015. Now, the controversy came to a head in 2016 when Agric Quest Limited, a Nairobi-based pharmaceutical company, got into a dispute with Kenya's Ministry of Health over their tetanus and polio vaccinations. And in stepped a group of Catholic doctors. Originally, they're the people who originally made the accusations, claiming that the vaccines may contain a hormone that is dangerous to young women and can cause potential sterilisation. At the time, the Catholic Church in Kenya claimed that the tetanus vaccine used by the government of Kenya and UN agencies was contaminated with a hormone, HCG, that can cause miscarriages and render some women sterile. The Church's position was informed by what had happened in Mexico, Nicaragua, and also the Philippines previously, where the various governments, together with the World Health Organization and UNICEF, had conducted similar campaigns using tetanus toxoid impregnated with beta-human chorionic gonadotropin, which is BHCG, that causes permanent infertility among girls and women. So I hope it, I know this show goes out to a lot of countries around the world. If they're coming to your area, move your people out. Push them out of your area. These people are psychopaths, intent on genocide, and mass genocide at that. You know, who made them God? Well, they can decide which people can have children or not. So it's not just Kenya. The church people who stood up and revealed the information, which was based on what had happened previous in Mexico, Nicaragua and the Philippines. I've no doubt it's taken place elsewhere. Of course, this is probably a part of the Bill Gates Foundation fund, because there was a lot happening in India. A lot of people were dying in India after the Gates Foundation went in there. This should not be tolerated and should be highlighted. Perhaps we should vaccinate all them. Arizona Republican Senator Jeff Flake, rather apt name, who's a frequent critic of President Donald Trump, sharply criticised the president on the Senate floor Tuesday for his remarks he made when he called Democrats treasonous. Seems a fair comment to me, but there's Republicans who are treasonous as well. Trump has accused stone-faced Democrats of treason for not standing and applauding during his State of the Union address. I have seen the president's most ardent defenders use the now wary argument that the president's comments were meant as a joke, just sarcasm, only tongue-in-cheek, he said. But treason is not a punchline, Mr. President. Well, why didn't he applaud? Because there was certainly some things that didn't please me, and but there's certainly a number of things that would please all people in that State of the Union. It's this stupid rivalry, and until we grow up and have a proper government where it's just people doing the best to their ability for the benefit of the people, not the benefit of lobbyists and corporations and bankers. This idea of parties, all it does is create division. They're both as bad as each other. Both are puppets. Personally, if there's a possibility once the announcement is made, re the sovereignty of America, there is a possibility we may have new elections, because what will be implemented is the real American government. Well, Mr. Trump is currently CEO of USA Inc. So that presidency could end and a new election could be declared. I would love to see Trump cancel the party altogether and go independent. We don't need it. You got on one side, you got happy clapping like performance seals, and the other like stone-faced. These people were born here. It's their country that they're mocking. Not mocking Mr. Trump. It's your country and its people you're supposed to be representing, and acting like clowns. Oh, because that's a Republican did that, I'm not going to applaud it. It's childish. And it needs to stop, both sides, and start thinking about how we fix this country together as one unit, not two perceived divided parties. As they're both two faces, one mask. Or two masks and one face, same thing. With hidden strings. This is the UK. I find this ironic. I had to read it twice. Tony Blair warning of conspiracies. Oh my. Anyway, David Cameron's former director of strategy has revealed that Tony Blair had warned him of a conspiracy within the civil service stating that the government workers believe they actually run the country. Not doing very well. And in the lead up to the 2010 election, the Conservative Prime Minister's former Director of Strategy, Steve Hilton, was tasked with preparing Cameron for his initial period in government. During this time, he says he met with Tony Blair, who warned of the dangers of civil servants. Well, he would know, given he was a former MI5/MI6 agent before he became Prime Minister, which he tried to have shut up. But Mr. Blair said you cannot underestimate how much they believe it's their job to actually run the country and to resist the changes put forward by people they dismiss as here today, gone tomorrow politicians. Blair reported this to Hilton, who was writing for the Fox News broadcasting, and his current employer. They generally see themselves as the true guardians of national interests and think that their job is simply to wear you down and wait you out. Touche, Mr. Blair. Touche. You still need to be held accountable for your actions to do with Iraq and the deaths you caused of British and American soldiers. For those who don't know, it was Mr. Blair that asked the Americans to go into war in Iraq. Now, most people think it's the other way around. No, it wasn't. It was Blair who asked then Bill Clinton to go into Iraq in 1998, and Clinton said no. We'd already helped you with Yugoslavia, which the Americans didn't really want to take part in, and he refused. Well, of course, in came the Mossad agent known as Lewinsky, and out went Bill Clinton. For those that don't know. I'll wait for time, okay. British Ministry of Defence, it's all coming out now, attempted to censor a document showing it had assassinated people outside of armed conflict zones by using drones. The government is now under pressure to come clean, and the ministry removed a passage from its report on drone use titled Joint Doctrine, which was published in September 2017, and according to the Canary, which is I don't know what that is anyway. Anyway, in the report, it acknowledges that critics have raised concerns about the legality of unmanned and remotely piloted aircraft missions and their potential for misuse. Quite why it's taken until now to realise that. Well, you should have realised that before they were launched, but there you go. The MOD acknowledged it was targeting people outside of war zones and said arguments against drones may also arise from the recent UK practice of targeting suspected terrorists outside of the armed conflict itself and the meaning and application of a state's right to self-defence. Yes, we've heard those terminologies before. And unfortunately, this passage was missing from the report. However, in the updated doctrine that the department uploaded late last year, it depends on the definition of who they class as terrorists. That's where it gets muddy. You know, could be the Manor World Holding Trust people be classed as terrorists in their eyes, probably. Anyone trying to make a real change that's going to benefit more of the people. All terrorists, you see. And there needs to be oversight, proper oversight, not only in this country, but also many of the Western countries. It's too easy to go down the dictator route, in my opinion. House Minority Leader Nancy Pelosi. Wish I'd have kept that recording of what Drake called her, because I'll play it now. took the rare step on Wednesday of giving a marathon speech supporting Democrats' attempts to legalise the status of young immigrant dreamers. Like they're remotely interested in other people. Oh dear. And this was in a bid to pressure Republicans to act. Her more than 8 hours speech ranked as the longest given by a member of House of Representatives in at least a century, and possibly ever, focusing on an issue that has dominated the Democratic agenda in recent months. But it also came as her caucus began 3 days of closed-doors meetings to craft a 2018 agenda that can win wider appeal in November's elections. Oh my God, not more. So Pelosi, thinking she's a Jeopardy music candidate, which I'd prefer to listen to. You know, personally, I would sooner smash me testicles in a car door than listen to her senile rambling. Yeah. She looks like a gurning ghoul. I let people sit there in front of her and listen to that 8 hours. Dear me. A senior White House official announced Wednesday that he's resigning now. Is there any left? After allegations of his 2 ex-wives, past always catches up, doesn't it? Of physical and emotional abuse. The official, Rob Porter, served as the staff secretary and often controlled the paper flow to President Trump's desk, along with his daily schedule. Porter also oversaw the White House's policy implementation process and worked closely with the Chief of Staff, John F. Kelly, to try and instill discipline in the chaotic West Wing. He spent hours of the day with Mr. Trump and frequently travelled with him on Air Force One. But Porter's first wife, who alleges that Colby Holderness alleges in an interview that he was abusive during their marriage. Again, that depends what you mean by abusive, but she alleges he punched her in the face during a trip to Florence back in 2005 and provided photos showing her with a black eye. Why now, you have to ask. 13 years ago. This will be the last news item because we're going to have some music to accompany this last music item. The Rothschilds have sold this week an Austrian hunting estate. A lot of history, this place. That is almost the same size as Manhattan, and the storied European banking family has owned for 143 years. The 5,412 hectare parcel known as Langau was part of a massive swathe of mountainous, densely wooded property Baron Albert von Rothschild of the family's Austrian line bought in the southern part of Lower Austria back in 1875, no doubt with using money from the trust, which they were prone to do. He set about restoring the forests depleted by Viennese loggers while building up his own forestry and gaming enterprises, again, no doubt using the trust money. According to the Rothschilds family archive, the Rothschild heirs, Nancy Clarice Tilghman and Jeffrey R. Hugot, who lived in the United States, live in the United States, sold Langau, which includes 2 power plants and a Grand Trillion-style lodge, to the owners of a paper manufacturing firm, Prinzhorn Holdings, in what has been heralded as a historic European land sale. The Austrian brokerage Bischoff Immobilien announced on Wednesday, while the brokerage has not released the final sales price, the Austrian media reported that the Rothschilds' heirs sold the property for €90 million, which is about $112 million, And over the past century, world events have buffeted Lengau and its ownership. Nazis confiscated the land in Lower Austria from the Rothschilds during World War II. So the Nazis weren't all bad, during which the families' homes and palaces in the area were destroyed, according to, again, to the Rothschilds archives, which is probably not a true reflection, but there you go. And Lengau itself, the size of which is 1 square mile smaller than Manhattan, was kept in the family through Russian occupation, which meant they could not access the property until 1952. And it's now been sold in a fire sale. I wonder why. Perhaps we'll have some fire sale music to accompany Rothschilds. Hi all and welcome back. 2 songs there for the Rothschilds and their fire sale. Oh boy, they don't like it. Well, we don't like the way they've carried on for so long. Like a parasite to humanity. And I can tell you on Tuesday something that you will now be all too familiar with. And this is the intel, by the way. The RV failed again. Oops. They're still trying to provide a non-working solution when the new solution is required. So they had another deadline, which then rolled on to the following day, like the previous week. And various hacking attempts were also made last night, because they made another projected promise to have funding again before noon today. And no surprise, it all failed. What fails me is the levels of stupidity of people who carry on waiting for that payment. It's not happening. And as the fire sale suggests, the Roths have no funding left. 112 million may seem a lot to people who listen to this show, but for the levels that they're into, financial issues and all the mercenary groups they've got to pay and all the media they've got to pay off, etc., and all the politicians that they've bought and paid for, it doesn't go too far. And I wouldn't be surprised if they sold more as time goes on. So, what happened next? Well, the Roths are now facing financial ruin, as we just said. They're forced to sell large properties. And so in stepped the evil old soul from many millennia past. Today, Mr. Kissinger. Now, because the Rothschilds failed to provide anything but a fire sale, the old guard now are in total desperation mode and have sent the old fogey, Kissinger, to steer and continue their failed path of stupidity. He's been in the White House all day, delaying everything, and basically he's stalling for time. Just perhaps he believes the Rothschilds are going to magic money. No, they're not. But the outcome of that is at 12 o'clock today, the budget was on course for a pass. Now, because of Kissinger's involvement, this may now cause a delay in the budget call, and Melted Candleface turned up and delayed everything. So, you know, Kissinger's 94, and some 94-year-olds can impart wisdom. This imparts and imbues evil. You know, we go on about Bushes and Clintons, and Rothschilds, but Kissinger kind of gets left out in many circles. Brzezinski was another name. But Kissinger's been involved in all kinds of heinous acts. Uranium deals, arms deals, trafficking, you name it. Kissinger's got his stamp on it. And I'm hoping the government people and the military arrest him, personally. He has nothing to offer. They've had nothing to offer, not only this country, but all countries around the world, apart from violence and looting and pillaging of the people's wealth. So at this point, I wouldn't be surprised if there's a shutdown, but don't despair on it, because it can be used as leveraging. I may have more on that at a later date. There's certain things that I just can't put out at the moment. But suffice to say, there's heavy meetings continuing involving our people and various governments and various organisations. And what I will say is progress is still on course. And progress continues on at least 4 to 5 levels of operation. I won't be saying what those levels are, but I think you'll get the gist. So this is my 5th show in the week. Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Tuesday and Thursday again. I did, obviously I did the follow-up to the announcement made last week. And some people didn't quite catch it. It was probably the shock. And I get that, so I hoped the piece I did last Friday, which explains the background of, you know, to the average American, the background piece is off the charts. What? No constitution? What? No republic? What? No government? What? Income tax is illegal. Our currency is not our own. We don't have a central bank. The IRS doesn't belong in America. Oops. But that's why I did that. So then, only once you understand that can you understand what we've done with the sovereignty. Because that's restoring everything, where America is now back in control of it, and not foreign agents, be it the Crown, or the Vatican, or the bloodline families, or the Rothschilds, or Kissinger, for that matter. Oh, that was the other thing Kissinger tried to do. He tried to do a coup in Russia. That failed also. So, I did the Friday show, and I hope that people found that helpful. And then I did a Saturday show with Ben Pam. And kind of followed up. Gets more people to know what is going on. And I know some members were not happy because Ben had certain opinions, but it's his show, and we handled it in a way the way it should be. You know, there's a lot of issues to do with immigration. We're you can't be awake and talk about immigrants. It's cognitive dissonance, because you're forgetting who created the system. These are the same people we're trying to bring down, where they create borders, and suddenly, just because you're 2 foot one side, you're American, and 2 foot the other side, you're Canadian or Mexican. Really? I thought we were all people. And once we start realising that, you know, I understand there's been a big drive across the media about Muslims all being bad. But I don't recall Muslims attacking this country. And some people will go, they did it in 9/11. No, research again. That's what you were told. It's not what took place. And then go back to the Faction Show, which was done on November the 8th, 2015, explaining all the different groups that was the former Illuminati. And it tells you a prophecy, which wasn't prophecy, it's a plan written by Albert Pike, KKK, and all kinds of other skullduggery groups, who laid out World War III involving the Muslims and the Christians. This is what they've tried to implement for the last 20, 30 years. And so it disappoints me that people who know that stuff can still peddle anti-Muslim. You know, in America, it was, for so many years, it was anti-Russian. It still is. But I don't recall Russia attacking this country either. You know, we have to stop listening to what they're telling you. This group's coming for us and that group's coming for us. Well, nobody's come for us. But there's people in high positions in this country who have gone after an awful lot of other countries, none of which who have attacked us. You know, can you imagine, let's use the country of Ireland. A lot of American people have an affinity with Ireland because a lot of people came to Ellis Island via Liverpool, my hometown, where I was born. But can you imagine Ireland being a rogue country and suddenly bombing Maine and New York and New Jersey, Washington, Chicago, Pennsylvania, on a day-by-day basis over a number of years? Would the American people just sit there? No, they'd want to fight back. So any Muslim who has a disliking for America, the country, you can understand. And I think it's part of the problem in this country is that we haven't been attacked, which is a good thing. But it doesn't, the trauma of being attacked then sets people in a mindset, we don't want a repeat of that. You try telling that to the people of Hawaii after the Pearl Harbor incident, whether they want war again. And they'll tell you, no, they don't. Because they've been attacked. Albeit with government collusion at the time. Another false flag. Well, a real false flag, but it was still a staged event. And then on Tuesday, I did a new show from one of our members, Ellen, better known as Spark, and we covered some of the basics on Tuesday, and it was a good show. I think people enjoyed it. We're going to do another one next Tuesday about the financial aspects of things, so look forward to that, unless something to do with THI comes up. But other than that, we will be doing that next Tuesday. One thing I have found, there's a couple of things that have disappointed me over the past few weeks, and I feel I should bring them up, is the lack of support from the alt media, fellow alt media people. You know, what we put out last week. It was kind of extraordinary, and I know we're all burnt out because everything that's been put out before has kind of not worked, but the lack of interest in it is very, very telling. You know, even if you don't 100% believe in it, you at least inquire about it, and it's kind of indicative of the way the alternative media's gone, where people would sooner be the deliverer of victimhood type fear porn and total BS as well, for that matter, rather than promote something or look at something that's of a more positive nature. So other than Ben Pam, which I was glad that I went on his show, we've had no interest from any of the other alt media people. I find that sad. Now, some people have come to me that kind of disappointed with the Facebook group, or some of the antics that have been going on. And a lot of it is being driven from our former group, Cosmic Voice. And I know one particular person in that group likes to trash me and throw all kinds of allegations out, just for the sake of it. None of it's borne out. But what I find disappointing is that some of our long-standing members in THI are clicking like on those Trash Thomas posts. You know, if you don't like me or you don't like the information, just leave the group. I'm fine with that. You know, I don't expect people to believe everything I say or follow me and think, you know, the gospel of Thomas is all there is, and only I can be right. That's just not the way this show operates, and so against what we've done with these shows. I will always welcome diverse opinions, provided it's based on learning and not just challenging for the sake of it. There is a difference, and some people I do know are struggling themselves and are using it as a projection of themselves, which then gets pushed onto others. And as I'm the one that's challenging us all to be better, including myself, hence I get more projections than others. But think before you post. And if you don't like the information, or you don't like me personally, then why are you in the group? That's victimizing yourself, not me. It's not helping you. If you don't like someone or don't like someone's information, it's like me going and being a member of Corey Good's group. I don't like that information, so I'm not partaking in it. Now, the person largely responsible for the attacks in CV, and perhaps people need to look into his background and certain boating activities and why he's connected with Keenan and Chambers. Apparently he thinks I'm an illegal. A case of more of the let's find anything to dig up on Thomas as the last round all proved unfounded. Oops. It's very sad, you know. I think people recognise I've put a lot of effort into this movement and this country. And that particular person hasn't even got the decency to put out his real name. Now, one thing that was reported to me this week, that Drake was apparently supportive of what we put out, which is good. You know, but I think it's time he stamped some of the vermin in his group out, because it's making him look weak, in my opinion. Not helping. Now, one of the things why I like diverse opinions is, in essence, it's challenging me to provide something to support certain information I put out. And most of the time I can provide certain support, and very detailed as well. And there's occasions when I can't, which is obvious to most, but some people always like to go too far. The one thing I will not do is jeopardize information, jeopardize the people that are in harm's way, and jeopardize the movement. It's just not important. The show's not important enough for me to do that. You know, we've got one chance at getting this right, and it has to be done in the right way. The previous attempts, like the white hat groups, all failed because they put out too much information and got infiltrated. We're not going to repeat that again. And that as has been reported on this show, our team have been shot out numbers of times. They've tried to abduct some of us to get us out the way. So if I can't give more details, there's a valid reason for it. The reality is we have more of the real intel than most other groups, if not all, because of the levels of it. So we do get more, but some people always demand more and more. Well, if I can give more and more, I will do that. But I'm not jeopardizing anything, So, I've been kind of challenged and dissected and had the information sliced and diced, but what I find sad is it's only one show or group that seems to face that level of investigation. Don't you find that rather funny? Like I said, personally, I welcome it. But when others are challenged in the same way, we may get a lot nearer to the truth than we've got currently in the alternative media. Where are we next? Mana, Mana and Mana. No, that's not an ABBA song. Some people are still struggling with the different versions of Mana. Okay, so listen closely, because I'm only going to say this once, because I've said it a number of times now on numbers of shows. But there is the Mana World Holding Trust, which holds a lot. It holds the accounts, and it also holds the contracts of treaties and all kinds of other stuff, and pledges of certain countries and resources that have basically been looted from every country. And the object of it is to return all that back to the original country, not the system, the original country. So Mana World Holding Trust holds the collateral accounts, as it's more commonly known as. Those funds belong to the people, and the lady who operates it is intent on delivering it back to the people. So that's the Mana World Holding Trust. It was them who declared the Kingdom of Mana, which is an island in just off Papua New Guinea called Manus, sovereign, because Mana World Holding Trust is the main sovereign. And so the Mana worked with the Kingdom of Mana, which is a country. And they're connected because the lady who is the trustee of Mana World Holding Trust is also connected with Jesper and the people of the Kingdom of Mana. Maybe that's where it gets confused. And of course, she's also known as Miss Mana. Eventually her name will come out, and eventually she will, she's already been on 2 shows. We're lining up a 3rd show, which should be a blockbuster. But as there's so much going on, the shows can wait. It's more important that the work is being done. rather than the shows. You know, that's why they have me, to come on and relay certain information at certain times. So Manor World Holding Trust is the holder of the accounts and can declare sovereignty. Kingdom of Manor is a country known as the Isle of Manus, Manus, and that's to do with Jesper and his team, some of whom we've had on our show. And so they're pushing forward with what they're doing, and we wish them well. And we also are hoping that the Manor World Holding Trust holds out and avoids the sniper fire and all kinds of other fun and games that's going on. And the third Manor, as I said, is the person known as Miss Manor, who's the trustee and guardian of the trust account, and also sent the Declaration of Sovereignty for America last week. Well, 2 weeks ago now. Further update, what I will say, there's a lot, people will have to understand there's a lot to undertake of being declared sovereign and sovereignty. So people need to be a bit patient, which is in short supply. I do know that. We're all tired of waiting and we want things to roll out. But things are being thrashed out currently. And obviously, the old fogey Kissinger came today to try and throw a spanner into the works. I don't think that's going to work either. The cabal still want to play, even though they've got no funds, and they still want to threaten. They haven't got much funds to do that either. And as each day goes by, their task is becoming more and more futile. But for those wanting more proof, I can't put out the letter. You know, I read it out word for word. You know, if there was a member that was close who wants to come and see it, to validate it, then I would be open to that and just cut off certain portions of it, because it does contain sensitive details, sensitive codes and account numbers and sensitive names. But all the rest, every other word was read out of that document that was hand-delivered to President Trump. Now, there was hints in the State of the Union, for people who are new to this show, is Trump said two things that are hints to the sovereignty. The first one was, he says, we're going to give Washington, D.C. back to the people. That was a key statement he made there. And the reason is, Washington, D.C., for those who don't know, I know most of our regular members do know, is Washington, D.C., District of Columbia, is not a part of America. It's a separate state principality with their own rules, their own constitution, which they forced on the people, not our original constitution, and they don't pay taxes either. A bit like the City of London and a bit like Vatican City in Rome. So Trump said he was giving DC back to the people. That's what happens when you declare sovereignty. And the other key thing he said right at the end, God bless America. Not God bless United States of America. God bless America, the country and its people. The United States is nothing to do with America. It's the corporation. The United States means it's the corporation. USA Inc., which is currently operating the government. Going forward, we'll have the real American government for the first time since 1871. So there's the two large hints that were confirmed, as I did ask were they hints he put out, and they were confirmed by somebody rather close to Mr. Trump, that's what he was getting at. So that's where we're at with the sovereignty. Where are we next? As I want to read Kevin Annet's thing out in a minute. Chemtrails, that caused a bit of furore on the page, which is okay. Some people had issues with the information I put out that there was counter spraying going on, and some people didn't like that idea or that information and called it BS, and that's fair enough. But then we have an issue. If it's not being counter sprayed, then these chemtrails are really not as bad as they're being made out to be, are they? They can't be. Why? Because that level of spraying with those amounts of chemicals and potions in it would have made hundreds of thousands sick by now. And clearly it hasn't, so something is amiss. Either the counter spraying is correct and it's negating the effects, or the information being put out about chemtrails is not correct. It's not as severe as it's being made out. From my understanding, it's been counteracted. But if people have a different opinion, again, that's fine. You know, just don't be nasty about it. But you can't have both, and that's why I brought this issue up. Either it's not as bad and it's a concern being blown up into a major issue like a fear porn, or something is happening to negate the effects of what it's doing. You can't have both. Of course, last week and the preceding weeks, there was a lot of excitement, and people were getting all giddy about releasing the memo. And I did warn it would be a bit of a damp squib, and so it turned out to be, as the memo's been out a week and there's hardly a mention of it. Why? Because there was nothing really in it. Some people argue, well, it was about article this and section this, and that was not implemented correctly. But the gist of that memo is one politician is digging the dirt on another. That happens at local level, it happens at county level, it happens at state level, and it happens at national level. It also happens at international level, where other countries interfere, not just Russia. You know, CIA has been documented as interfering in 61 different countries' elections. Oops. So that to me is not news, that politicians are digging dirt. You know, now they've mentioned there's another election coming up in November. You're going to see those party political adverts going, did you know this candidate was involved in this and involved in that? Well, where do you think that came from? It's exactly the same policies that the memo stated. Was it just different because it's Mr. Trump? Because this is happening on every single level. It just wasn't news. And I warned it was the media blowing it up into something it's not. Like I said, it's been out a week, and has anything happened because of this secretive memo? No. That's why I said, what happens next? We have to be aware, more aware of when they promote something as being all so important politically, because 99 times out of 100 it appears to have no effect whatsoever, and it's another part of the theatre production, which is the politics are now. It's pure theatre. he said, she said. No, we didn't do that. They did, and we're not voting for you, and we're not clapping if you say something, and we won't clap back if you. It's pure theatre, and quite frankly, it's an embarrassment to this country. It really is an embarrassment. And all the to and froing in the political debate. And yet, has anyone seen a comment from the person who lost the election? Not one comment from Anne. Wonder why. Wonder why. Two more bits I want to cover. Military mindsets. I could go on, but I won't. I'm just going to keep this brief. Part of the programming, people would call it training. Given the levels of it, it's programming. They have to act tough. And so if they are a bit flexible, it's perceived as a sign of weakness and undermining their authority. It's actually, if you display flexibility, is actually a strength, not a weakness. If you recognize something is wrong and fail to correct it, that is a weakness, not a strength. Perceiving that certain countries are enemies with no evidence to support it, and just going along with the programming, is again a sign of weakness. But you are perceiving it as a strength. It's not. The mind abuse that the put soldiers through on all levels has a lasting impact. And one of the things they do in the military is tell you not to think for yourself. Which may have some benefits to the soldiers on the battlefield when you're following orders. But those certain soldiers go on to become the generals and the colonels and all the other title names of the military. You really think those type of people with that type of mind control and abuse suffered as a soldier, plus the war trauma, plus the drugs they've gone through and the programming, can perceive what is right and what is wrong, what is strength and what is weakness. Oh, I'm General blah blah, I must act tough. General Mattis, one of the comments I read this morning, that was relayed by him, it's a hoot to shoot people. Now, in times of weakness, we all feel like that. Let's shoot the Rothschilds, let's shoot the Bushes, let's shoot the Clintons. It's only when you have a strength of resolve of knowing a better way. And killing people is the last resort. And a weakness, in my opinion. So I would prefer General Mattis to not act tough whilst spouting rubbish like it's fun or it's a hoot to kill people. Because that's not really a strength, it's a weakness. The cabal and the system, the military are protecting their system because they've been told what to do. Follow orders. But even they must see that the system has failed. They've failed militarily, they've failed politically, they've failed financially, they've failed the genocide programming. But the majority of us are all still here. At which point do they step out of the mindset of perceived toughness, which is actually weak, and show some real strength and stand up and say, enough's enough. We have to protect our people, we have to protect our country, and we have to protect our future. That's the real strength. Not hiding, not projecting strength by talking gung-ho, we're going to have bigger missiles than Russia and China. That's child's play. And is really a weakness. That you've got to project that sort of mindset onto, like it threatens Russia and China that you're going to have bigger weapons. I'd like to think the people of Russia and China think better than that. I'd like to think our people will do the same also. Right, that's it for the Intel and the op-ed pieces. Now, I'm going to read out now something that Kevin Annett wrote to the Canadian Broadcasting Company. Because for the first time, they've started relaying some of the information. Of course, they put their own spin on, which enraged Kevin, and so he wrote this letter to the Canadian broadcast, and I'm pleased to be able to read it out. And this was done this week. Dear CBC, Canadian Broadcasting Company, it's been a while since I wrote to you jokers, but yesterday's news makes it impossible for me to resist dropping you a note. Ever since the spring of 2008, when your corporation bosses agreed to cooperate with the Canadian government and its partner churches in censoring my name and the evidence of their genocidal crimes out of your reporting, I haven't seen much point in relying on the CBC as a credible platform for the voluminous evidence of those crimes. And sure enough, once again, your chronic adulterous union with Big Brother has produced, yes, another bastard child, namely your after-the-fact paltry depiction of the medical genocide as a church-run Indian hospitals as just another litigation-bound case of abuse against our poor Indians. I hope I'm not being too impudently un-Canadian when I point out that any media agency that habitually obfuscates official crimes in our great white north to the extent that the CBC has done does not get to claim the mantle of credible journalism. But be that as it may, and it usually is, I'd like to point out a number of glaring errors, omissions and misrepresentations in your stories on crimes at the Nanaimo, I hope I said that right, Nanaimo Indian Hospital and similar facilities across Canada. I'm doing so on the basis of more than 20 years of on-the-ground research, documentation, and countless interviews with the actual survivors of these hospitals and their associated Indian residential schools. Research that your agency has studiously ignored since the summer of 1998, when it was first offered to the CBC. First of all, the Indian hospitals weren't government facilities. They were established and ran by medical missionaries of the United and Anglican churches in conjunction with the military, specifically the Defence Research Board in Ottawa. Your article doesn't mention the churches or the army at all. Well, gee now, I wonder why. Did somebody say Project Paperclip? Second, you uncritically present the official line that these hospitals were tuberculosis treatment facilities. Wrong. That was their cover. Every witness I've interviewed says that they didn't suffer from TB at all and were incarcerated there as children in healthy condition. They were then either deliberately infected with TB or used in drug testing, mind control, sensory deprivation, or sterilisation experiments by army and church doctors. Dr. James Goodbrand, who worked at the hospital and quoted as saying to patient Sarah Modeste just before he made her infertile, "I get paid $300 by the government for every Indian woman I sterilise." Sounds like the Kenya story. Lots of women and children died from these horrors and were buried in secret on the hospital grounds. Again, there's no mention of this in your article, despite it being common knowledge among Vancouver Island survivors. Next, rather than describe what went on in these death camps as undeniable genocide, your account spins the whole nightmare as if it's just another case of unfortunate abuse, that the right words and monetary compensation can make it all better. Your article even quotes the salivating, waiting in the wings personal injury lawyers and their planned billion-dollar class action lawsuits against Ottawa. But surely even you guys know from experience that lawsuits are just the perpetrator's convenient way of getting legally indemnified and absolved for any consequences of their crimes, as the entire Truth and Reconciliation fiasco proved ad nauseum over the past decade. For you to even present this medical genocide as a legally actionable issue is to deliberately mislead Canadians. For in case you haven't bothered to pick up a phone to check, the Canadian government officially sealed all of the records of the Indian hospitals in the spring of 1999. Go figure. Soon after our first independent tribunal into these horrors released its report. In fact, as early as 1965, special church and government document destruction teams have systematically wiped clean the evidence of experiments, deaths and punishments at residential schools and Indian hospitals. This crucial history is not mentioned by your journalists. Clearly there was and is a lot of dirt to hide in the Indian hospitals, and the CBC is lending its usual hand in helping conceal these crimes by not mentioning them for years and then functioning as a public centre of the real story. Here's a case in point. The expert source you quote in your article is Laurie Maya Dries, a native studies, in inverted commas, academic from the college immediately adjacent to the grounds of the Nanaimo Indian Hospital, Vancouver Island University. Well, guess what, boys and girls? In recent weeks, the very same woman in league with a fellow Aboriginal functionary, Louise Mandel, the Vancouver Island University Chancellor, suppressed an article in the campus newspaper, The Navigator, entitled "Who and What is Buried Next to VIU? Genocide in Our Own Backyard." The article quoted eyewitness Joan Morris, who was imprisoned in a hospital for nearly a decade, as saying lots of people were dying in there. Every morning they were taking little bodies out of the wards on those metal gurneys. My cousin Nancy Jo saw them bury those kids in the field behind us, up near the highway. The VIU apparatchiks, Ms. Dries and Ms. Mandel, had these words and the entire issue of The Navigator scooped up by campus security to prevent students from reading such evidence of the real crime. Now here's the thing. This rapid on-the-ground censorship of the real Indian hospital story on the verge of official national spin doctrine of the issue by the CBC just couldn't be a big frigging coincidence, could it? An equally glaring problem about the CBC's pretense at reporting this issue is that your account is so completely dated. Ever since June of 1998, all of the stories and evidence about the Indian hospitals quoted in your article have been known and made public by our own independent inquiry into genocide in Canada. For instance, Angel Hunt, whom you cite in your article, told me exactly the same account of her mother's torture over 10 years ago in my home. Her words and those of many of the other survivors have also been published by me for many years, along with everything else you'll need to expose the real story of genocide in Canada. And considering the slothful nature of your average Canadian journalist, I've even made it easy for you to do so. It's all posted at www.murderbydecree.com and described in my dozen or more books and our documentary film on genocide in Canada. Of course, you all know this already and have yet refused to report any of our evidence or the testimony of our hundreds of eyewitnesses. In that sense, you've been a willing accessory to the crime. Hear, hear. But now that lawyers and the spin doctors have their hands on the issue and the culprits of the church, state and corporation can once again get away with their crime with a little bit of litigation, the whole bloody mess has apparently become newsworthy in the mind of CBC. But as long as it's politically expedient at least, the method and game plan in this latest spin doctrine is identical to the residential schools fiasco, in which mass murder was absolved with an apology and some paychecks. And conveniently, not a single killer or church-state official ever went to trial, let alone jail. But this time the stakes are even higher, since the medical murder in these hospitals involved the Americans, the CIA's paperclip scientists, yes, you, Mr. Mengele, and you, Mr. Green, and their big pharmaceutical corporate partners that ran and profited off the drug testing, sterilisation and other experiments done on children like Joan Morris. And so once again, thanks to the CBC, the full story of the Canadian genocide is continuing to stay hidden, and the killers are winning the day, at least within our own borders. The witnesses are almost gone, the mass graves are mostly dug up or forgotten, and the erasing of history is itself being erased. But fortunately, a higher accountability and power is at work. It's called international law. On April 15 of this year, governments around the world will be asked to begin an embargo and sanctions campaign against Canada and its churches for their crimes against the innocent. Already found guilty of genocide in an international court in 2013, Canada and its sponsors in London and Rome could soon begin to face political and economic heat for their felonies, as will the CBC. And so, since the writing is on the wall, people, what do you have to lose by reporting the whole truth and nothing but the truth for a change? When the crows do finally come home to roost, you have to at least appear to have done the right thing. And being Canadians, you're good at creating appearances at least. Oh, Canada. That was written by Kevin Annett. We've had Kevin on the show. I've met Kevin personally, and a couple of our members on the page turned up that day. You know, he's another one, boots on the ground. He's been out there, he's interviewed these people, and the stories in Kevin's book are nothing short of horrific. And what they're trying to do is spin it out. They've spun out the lies that took place in World War II, so that everyone's died, so there's no comeback. They're trying to spin out the lies of ET disclosure. So all those that have committed crimes by doing that will have all passed on. And this is a common theme, where the cabal want to basically disclose everything but over 50 years, so that everyone currently alive is dead and no comebacks. Nice little setup for them, but it's not good for us. And you know, there's people who have a poor opinion of Kevin. If you met the man, you would change that opinion, because what he's saying is valid. Whether he gets his desire remains to be seen in a very, very corrupt world, with a very, very corrupt system, with a lot of cowardly people who won't stand up and support the truth and stand by it. You know, we can all be internet warriors, but that man goes out on a limb. He's been threatened, he's been jailed, and he should be given credit for the work of exposing those level of crimes. These are not your average politician things. This is the Nazi genocide program that was brought to North America. There's a lot of Americans who don't see that we've been in the Fourth Reich. I've covered that extensively on our shows. The piece Tomorrow Belongs to Me. It's all there. Look at the names. Schumer. It's German descendants that were brought over. Was it 247,000 of them was brought over from the Operation Paperclip, of which there was 3 portions of it, and also Operation Overcast. Vast amounts of American people's money. 247,000 flights. That's right. I think I remember correctly when I did that piece. Between 1946 and 1948. Thousands and thousands of genocide people brought to these shores. And a lot of them, the experimentation, this is where we ended up with the heinous experiments of MKUltra with the CIA, because they ran the CIA before it was called the CIA. It was known as OSS, with SS being the prevalent 2 letters. And Mengele and Dr. Green have done no end of genocide up in Canada and mind control programs. And that particular region, Vancouver, Oh dear. Monarch programs where they're using girls as sex slaves, aka Britney Spears. It's riddled right through Canada. It's riddled right through this country. But given Canada's so less populated, it seems far more prevalent there than it is here. But the reason is that's where a lot of the testing goes on. And most people don't care about the Native Americans. More concerned with their own kind, or not concerned at all. And this is why we have to stop this nonsense about, well, they're a different colour, or they're a different country, or they're a different... No, we're not different. On the bigger picture side, we have a common enemy of evil criminality in our midst that are just wiping us out, and have done over a long period of time. These are the same goons that introduced the Black Plague. These are the same goons that introduced the Spanish flu. These are the same goons that set fire to large parts of Europe in the 1600s. The same goons that then created 2 world wars and are hell-bent on trying to create a 3rd world war, which they won't achieve. And people have the audacity to criticise Kevin. He's been there. He's seen the abuses. He's spoken to the people. He even gained their trust. Because none of those people he spoke to, they run away from church people. And of course, Kevin was a pastor. And he still gained their trust, so that they would relay their stories, which he documented heavily in the books. We can't keep ignoring these type of crimes. It's gone on far too long, and kudos for Kevin for taking on the system, because sadly too many won't. Live is life. We'll be back shortly. Hi all, and welcome back to the final portion of tonight's show. And let's just finish that up. Some questions, lots of very similar. I tried to categorise them before, but I ran out of time, so there'll be some repeat answers. Lots of people asking, when's their country going to be declared sovereign? So we'll go through them and see what we pick out. Is there a plan in place to assist mind-controlled people such as Justin Trudeau to be healed and repurposed from programs like MKUltra? I hope so. But first we have to remove the elements that are doing it, and that's no easy task. You know, it's a system that's heavily enmeshed like a spider's web, and this is kind of one of the reasons I mentioned previous that a lot of people don't like, but then that's fine. But I look at it from an overview point of view at times, and some of the answers even from that I see from it don't please me either. But I just wonder whether we should have with a full disclosure, with a full disclaimer. Again, people can feel free to disagree with that. You know, lots of people have been affected in different ways. Some have lost their family members. You're not going to bring them back, and it's certainly not going to be helpful going through, as Kevin says, litigation where they just say I'm sorry and then walk away. You know, the amount of crimes on this committed that haven't been dealt with. The prisons, the prison, we need to build a whole heap of prisons, which would create a lot of work, but then we've also got to pay for them. And I just wonder whether it would be the best way to go forward, and it may encourage a load more to step down quicker if they didn't have that fear factor of, I'm going to get lynched. You know, a lot of these people are rather old that have ran these programs. They haven't got that long left anyway, most of them. Now the Kool-Aid has been largely, or certainly hampered immensely, that they can't extend their life via that like they used to anyway. It may be something that people have to think about. Do we spin it out for 20, 30, 40 years? Because that's what they want, because they're frightened of people coming after them. George Bush Sr. said if people found out what our family had done, they'd lynch us in the street. So that's the type of fear that they have. People would argue, well, so they should. But then it's not helping the victims too much either, that it's been span out, because there's elements in the program, and yes, the top, in my opinion, the top end ones have to be dealt with in a public justice way, preferably, as I mentioned last week, through a military court rather than having snake oil salesmen known as bar lawyers creaming vast amounts of money off it. And the people in the alternative media and the whatever is being adjudicated on, if it's, say, Dr. Green or Mengele and his partners who are in the court, then there should be people who have gone through the MK Ultra program who observe and administer and oversee that real justice is served. Other more political crimes, members of the alternative media should be there. The financial crimes, people who understand the finances, could be from the, we must have financial, Jim Willie and Sirius Dogstar know about the public markets. They don't know as much about the private markets, but they're very clever in what they do. Maybe they should be asked to attend courts where there's financial implications and oversee justice. I think that's a better way than them hiding it, and then maybe we can get, by full disclosure, which technically we've already had, the CIA has admitted it and released the documents, and yet the public largely knows very little about it, and a program is developed to ease the people who have been mind controlled. You're not going to cure them, not in this lifetime. You're just not. MK Ultra victims will tell you that. The programs and the mind splitting goes far too deep to be able to heal. You can get better to a point, but there's still trigger points that can tip that individual into a Manchurian candidate, a suicide candidate, or a mass school event, or suddenly to go and drive a van into a load of people on bridges. This is what they're capable of, and they have little or no idea what they're doing. Look at the guy in the Boston, no, not the Boston, the Batman Theatre. He didn't know what day it was. Could it have been him that did the shooting? Possible. Likely not. But that's the type of stuff this MK Ultra does. An ordinary person who doesn't know they've been programmed and mind controlled can suddenly turn into a homicidal maniac. Well, unless you are somehow able to erase the triggers, which the only thing I can think of is a complete lobotomy. You're not going to be able to cure them. You just have to put them in an environment where those triggers for those people are not prevalent. That's the difficulty. In the Humanity Unplugged episodes, you frequently referred to the Russian Levashov, a philosophy on human spiritual development. Who was he? Well, he's someone who got in touch with himself and his multi-dimensional aspect. Was he given help, outside help? Yes. And those shows were important. If you're new and haven't listened to them, you need to listen. It gives you a very good overview of what has taken place here, how sickness, where it comes from. Like cancer comes from the lower astral. It's a virus. It's not caused by smoking, and it's not caused by this, and it's caused by entity infection. But I will warn you, those shows are rather heavy, and you have to be in a good headspace to listen, because some of the things it talks about if you take drugs, be it pharmaceutical or the pot, etc., the damage you've done to yourself. Alcohol in excess, the damage, the holes it creates in your PSI field. But it also helps a lot of people to understand the nature of the body that we've not been told, the nature of the cosmos that we haven't been told, and the nature of reality that we haven't been told. So they're interesting stuff. Why do you believe his theories? Because the information contained in those books was relayed to me in the dream time. When I first started reading that, I was blown away. The first 30 pages was everything that I knew. And I think perhaps he was also helped in the same way. I supplemented. It wasn't all Levashov in that show. Some of it was my own stuff, because I'm not a scientist, and suddenly I was being given all these complex science theories, and some of which I've put in pondering sections in the show. But I was reading the first chapter of it, part 1, and with goosebumps, because I felt I'd already read it in the dream time. I knew I hadn't read it in the so-called awake time. Almost like I knew all the words. And it came to a section where I did get information via the dream time about the G matter and the G note. And because I had that information, then I was able to expand on Levashov's work on that point, which is covered in the shows. What experiences influenced your awakening most? Oh, too many. That'll take another show. I could go on forever with that. I feel like I've lived about 5 lifetimes in the last 5-6 years. The knowledge gained, it's almost like multiple encyclopedia downloads. I feel like a robot myself at times. I don't know how I keep going. Perhaps I've got good Duracell batteries, like the wind-up bunny. I have no idea. ET experiences when I was young. knowledge at a young age that I didn't know where it came from. It certainly wasn't learned from friends, family or neighbours. It was completely off the wall. Of course, at that age I didn't understand what I do now, and that's been what's kind of driven me on the path of research ever since. And then you find out certain things that you remember that you dismissed as coincidences or strange things, and then you realise, you know what, they were real. Then you go, but what is real? It's like the classic, but that's not normal. And my answer would be, what do you define as normal? Some people say that's paranormal. Maybe that's normal and everything else is para. So that would take a whole show to experiences, some of which I've never released. I might do one day. I don't know. We'll see. How will the clean-up of the synths be handled? After all, some of them have genetically become part of some biological humans' lives. Well, if proven correct that they are all synths, and the evidence points that way, as the frequencies change and gets to a certain point, inorganic will cease to exist. It will still exist for them, but not for organic humans. So it'll just phase out. And this is what's kind of taken place. This is the two worlds. Two worlds has more than one meaning, not just the synthetic, it's the overlay of the worlds as well. It's two earths that they've been trying to merge to create the Nazi timeline, which is covered in Fringe. But some people, that lady, the blonde lady in Fringe, is capable of traversing the two worlds for real, by the way. It's based on a real event. And other people have that same ability, they just don't realise they're doing it. Through meditation sessions or dreamtime sleep sessions or awake sessions. You can go. In our gratitude towards the mutual respect being born between the Aqua people that have helped us presently, what things would they like us to do now to make the world a better place? They must be suffering too. Yes. We have a common enemy. They're not particularly fond of humans because we've kind of not served them too well. Again, more to do with misuse, largely military, and largely some of the fishing techniques that have kind of ruined a lot of the fish species. You know, there's no need for that level of fishing, particularly when most of it goes to waste, which is the reality of fresh fish. You know, they would probably say the same as what I do. Make yourself better. There's too many suffering within themselves. There is a marked difference at this time for the ones that have attempted and done some of their shadow work and their inner work, and the ones that haven't. They can't carry on masking that they have because it's now reflecting in their behaviour. I did tell you the masks of illusion would come down for everyone. It's unavoidable. Part of the thing going forward is most of us are demanding the truth. And yet the biggest thing we do is lie to ourselves. We create a world of illusion around us. That we're doing better than we are. That we've got more money than we have. There's a whole heap of things that where we present ourselves in not the real light. Well, those masks are coming down not just for the cabal, they're coming down for everyone. And so your ills and your traumas will project out. Had you worked on them, you could have controlled it in your own time space. Now it's being thrust upon people and you're seeing what's taken place. Some people are, or too many people, even awake people, are losing it. Completely losing it. And that's the consequences. We ask for the truth, we ask for a better world. Well, you've got to become better people to then create a better world. And too many of us have acted in ways that's not beneficial to the all, and too many have acted in service to the self. Not service of the self to then be service to others. Big difference. So they would say it's time that we started behaving in a better manner than we have. Looking after the animals, looking after the plants, and looking after nature and the trees and the oceans, and not destroying everything. And it takes a hefty change of mindset. I mentioned mindset earlier about the military. The fact that we haven't got as many nuclear weapons or bigger nuclear weapons as Russia is not a sign of weakness. It's actually a strength. Because it's a sign of stupidity if that's what you judge or base how great your country is. I'd sooner our president turn around and says we have better health service and better education, and we look after the elderly and the children and the veterans better. That will we, America, be our world leaders in that. Not world leaders in we've got more missiles than you or bigger missiles. That's the thinking of a child. And we have to grow up and become more adult. Where are we next? Can you distinguish a synthetic? The eyes are different, mainly. And the skin looks plasticky. Here's the first one of, I think we've got about 4 countries I'm going to answer this for. I live in Holland. How will the effect of the Declaration of Sovereignty of America be on Europe and especially Holland? What are your thoughts or knowledge on that? I haven't been given... I know of certain countries that have approached, and more have since, but I haven't been given the whole list on which countries have actually approached the Manor World Holding Trust to start the paperwork. All the paperwork for each country is ready and available for when they are ready to implement it. And yes, certain countries have already been threatened, but we need to show collective courage, because they're being threatened by the same people and the same groups, and it's up to the other countries to come together and tell them to go and F themselves. So if I get a list and I'm allowed to put it out, because we have to protect the country, the people who have come forward. Their lives go on the line. If I, for argument's sake, say Ireland approached us last week, then there's people in the government who are going to get their heads blown off if that's what the people in Ireland who work for the cabal don't want. So if I get the go-ahead to name the countries who have applied, I don't know, one or two, then I will release that in one of the shows. Holland, I would suspect, and I'm not saying this is 100% true, will be one of the stragglers. You reported the US military sold all the military's hardware to the Rothschilds and the Chinese elders. If they, the Rothschilds, demanded the military to hand over the hardware, as the military brass does not own the hardware, which I would think the US taxpayer owned, yes, they forget that, what power or court of law could force the military to hand it over? The Rothschilds seem to be always at the centre of human misery. Do you know when they will be arrested and tried for crimes along with so many others? In my opinion, they should have been scooped up a long time back. And sadly, it has to do with military weakness. They keep projecting their strength, the might of the American military, and yet they're still kowtowing and bowing down, certainly some of the top brass are, to all things Rothschild, when they've been shown the multiple evidence, live evidence as well, of the crimes of the Rothschild family, the looting of the American government's money, trillions stolen out of all kinds of bank accounts, and still they sit there. Like I keep saying, they keep projecting this great strength while exhibiting real weakness. Your dinars are not coming, because most of those who stole are sitting on bundles of dinars. Service to self again. And that's why I have much disdain for the USA Inc. military, because they could have saved the people not only in America but a lot of other countries that have had their whole lives tipped upside down by bombs being dropped on them from 30,000 feet for no apparent reason other than appeasing other neo-hawks' bank balances and certain rogue countries in the Middle East. And the reason Rothschilds always seem to be at the centre is because they've got their fingers in every faction. So they don't particularly care, and this is the level of the Rothschilds, they don't particularly care which faction wins, because they win anyway. But I do. And there's many other people now seeing through the illusion. And maybe one day they will be in not just having fire sales, they'll be having jail cells. With America signing a contract, I have to wonder what is stopping them from getting their assets and then dissolving the contract and handing the assets over to the Rothschilds. Part of the sovereignty is moving away from the Rothschilds' control. Rothschilds are the crown, remember. Part of the crown, anyway. So this sovereignty is in essence a war on the Rothschilds and their elements of control via banks in every country, central banks, most of them as well. That's how they've obtained the wealth. Except now all the banks are bankrupt. Oops. And the new system's in place and they can't hack it. Again, oops. So there's no chance, from what I know, of them being able to do that, because there will be conditions put in place. This is about returning assets to the American people, not to the Rothschilds or any other criminal elite. It's going back to the American people. Still a lot of work to do, I might add, but we've made giant strides. On meditation, Thomas, can you tell us how consciousness relates to time? My meditation has gone from half an hour to 1 hour plus lately. I'm quite surprised that the clock has advanced an hour or so, yet I'm sure the actual time spent meditating is about 5 to 10 minutes. Is this how consciousness affects the all? Consciousness doesn't relate to time. When you get it in that state, there is no real time. This is why it feels, if you're in certain situations and you're not engaged in the lower astral, it feels like bliss. So there is no time. Time is a control mechanism here, brought in by none other than the Vatican Church, for those of you who don't know. Don't they bring all things in that are negative, largely? So many people will experience the same thing. You think you've just sat there for 5 or 10 minutes, but you've been gone for, depending where you go, you could have been gone for 20 years or 30 years in that 5, 10, 15 an hour. So time doesn't correlate to consciousness, it's how we perceive it in the awake mode. So I hope that answer gives you an idea. But basically, you remember 5 to 10 minutes, but you've been away from here and in another state. And I don't mean you've gone to Florida, I mean in another transition phase where you've gone out and away from here. So you can't really correlate that as time. I hope that's answered what you wanted. If not, put in more details and I'll have another go at it. Thomas, you once mentioned the world splitting in two. Yeah, it's not going to crack in half like a pool ball. The world is already in two. People are experiencing it. Some people are seeing it. And some people know there's something not right and can't put it into words or an understanding. But there's the overlay with the Nazi timeline, which won't succeed. And then the world splitting into two between organic and inorganic. So there's a number of aspects to it. There's also splitting into two again. And this is almost like the cell division, where the people who have done their inner work and dealt with the shadow sides are now seeing the benefits of that and it's fairly obvious to the ones that have done it, the ones that haven't. And we're not here to point fingers at those people. They have to do it in their own time. You know, I can't do it for you. Your next door neighbour, your partner can't do it for you. You have to do it yourself. It's called personal responsibility. And that's something many of us have not exhibited in this lifetime. We've handed over responsibility to gods and schools and hospitals and governments to take care of us or look after us. No, we have to look after ourselves. Who says it's somebody else's responsibility to look after you? Now, obviously, if you get sick or disabled, then we have provision to look after people who are that way. But if you're able-bodied and able to work, why should somebody else look after you? And in essence, what you're doing is you're giving your power away, and we've given our power away in bundles, and it's not worked too well for us, has it? That's what's created this disastrous world that we live in, full of crimes and filth, degradation, envy, you name it, greed. It's because we keep handing over responsibility to other people, and unfortunately those other people are psychopaths, and you wonder why the world's the way it is. And those other people ultimately are not interested in us, and yet too many still look for them to fix things. They've never fixed anything in any aspect of our life. We're driving around in old technology because they've denied it. We've got antiquated hospital procedures because they don't want you to find out that cancer's not a virus. So they'll chemotherapy you. Makes more money, you see. So we have to start looking after ourselves and then looking after each other. Yellow Rose for Texas, who says Earth is leaving this construct through the eye. Yeah, I've already seen that. And then there's this wonderful down-to-earth news about sovereignty. Do you know how I can see the three combined into one single vision of the future? Meditate on it and manifest. Our manifest abilities for all of us is now a lot more, has a lot more punch than it ever did. I like to be confident in explaining what the world trust is to others. To my knowledge, it's a financial system set up at Earth's inception. It's also the source of finance for things such as food stamps in America. That said, I don't feel informed enough to explain this to others. Well, you could refer them to the 3 shows that was done on Thursday, Friday and Saturday. And also the show in August that we did with Miss Manor, that again explains certain things, but there's a lot of people wanting to know about the information about certain things, and that will all be released. At the moment, it's not safe to do so. It's not holding on to information like others have. You know, I'd like to put all of it out, but I have to be responsible for the people that are at risk, and boy, are we at risk currently. These people don't like what we've done. We're the ultimate in enemies. What, you've helped the people? You can't be doing that. This is their mentality. Why would you help the piglets? Because actually we have value far more than they'll ever achieve. We just have to recognise it. So that will be my recommendation. The World Trust, operated by Miss Manna, she's the trustee in The Guardian, and that trust has been used for negative purposes for far too long by negative humans and others for far too long. And now a group of people have decided it's the people's money, which it is. It belongs to all of us, not just them. And it should be put out in a way, a sensible way. So don't be thinking you're getting X number of millions out of it, as you know, where we can build a better future for all. After that, once everything's done and people have done the inner work and learned to act as a community again, I don't think many of us, if you get to that stage, will have a want or a need for money at that point. But we're a long way from that yet. So recommend the 3 shows rather than trying to attempt. It's fairly simple. I did mention a bit about it before with the Manna and Manna. But as more details will be forthcoming. It seems because of our aggressive military presence, it's not ours, it's there. I think that's become quite clear with the sovereignty, with the wording of it, that the military would return back to American control. Currently, it's not our military. Presence throughout the world that we very easily could be void our renewed sovereignty. Would the Kingdom of Manna, well, it's actually the Manna World Holding Trust, give us a grace period to stop our conflicts? Well, this is kind of what's being thrashed out at the moment. Like I said, it's, you know, most people have no idea the depths of the things that just have to be changed just in this country. But what it will do is, once it's officially announced, it will send a shockwave right round this world. Well, if America can do it, then so can Ireland, so can Holland, Australia, you name it. Was there tech used when the Great Flood happened? To my knowledge, yes. They knew it was coming, or knew it was happening, put it that way, because they were the ones that were involved in it. The Draco. And they told the Draco people to build an ark, which I don't think was a boat. I think it was a craft. Those military people who've been split and mind controlled, this is similar to the earlier question, it might have been the same person, it's just been carried over. How can you help them integrate their altars since they don't know they've been split? Not too easily. I don't think I explained that enough before. Also, with the AI gone, are they less likely to be triggered or activated? The AI doesn't trigger it. Some aspects of it might, but not overly. Do I have to file my income tax for 2017 this year? Yes. just carry on as normal rather than putting yourself at risk. If it changes, it'll all get paid back, I would imagine, but I'm certainly not promising that. I owe 200,000 to the Australian government. Is it going to disappear? That would be nice if it did, Michael. Given some of the antics of the colonial government over there, servants to the crown and all. Is the peace treaty now signed by all, which resulted in starting of dishing out sovereignty? It's not. I was going to answer that in a different way. I think you're talking about the 16,500 year thing. I think that was very close. It may have been completed now, but there's not much going on. It's kind of been put on the back burner because there's more important things in the front that needs to be dealt with. But I will try and inquire where the status is on that treaty. But it's possible it's all done now, yeah. How will it affect the implementation of 5G, and will we be able to not consent to smart meters? Well, given they are damaging, the government will return as an American government who is bound to look after the people. Things like that will get changed. How quickly it will happen at this point is debatable. And that doesn't mean to say it's going to be years and years away, but there's certain things that have to be done in a certain order that are going to be easier to transition, because most of the transition is not going to be easy because, like I said, just the IRS, you could, everyone, if I said to you tomorrow the IRS is shutting down, the majority of people will be jumping up and down. But then there's a whole load of people who rely on jobs because of the IRS. So all the accountants, most of the accountants will be out of work overnight, so they won't be jumping up and down. So things have to be phased in and phased out. It's not like there's going to be much change going from the USA Inc. government to the American government. You just put the same people in there for now, and then we have proper elections for the first time since 1871 that don't involve Russians, even though they weren't involved last time, and don't involve Soros machines and Rothschild's machines and Android machines interfering with it. No hanging chads, no dodgy lawyers and sheriff families in Florida deciding on what votes to count and what not to. Those people can all then be actually arrested and dealt with on the spot. Unlike now, because they're operating under their own constitution, which nullifies their crimes. That was read out in a document a couple of weeks ago. That's why they can carry on with impunity, because they're operating under their own constitution, not the real one. Will there be an official document of the US sovereignty treaty posted for the public that we can refer to? I'm hoping so. Once there's an announcement, that letter, people will find out for true that I read it out word for word. But yes, hopefully soon we can release the official document that was sent and hand-delivered to Mr. Trump, and it was acknowledged and verified and then accepted. So, will someone be over the funding to see that the crooks do not dip into the accounts again and steal them? I'm hoping so. one of the perhaps growth jobs, as certain government jobs are closed down, because there's a lot of government jobs that are operating on parts of services that are not required, like multiple agencies that America, the country, doesn't need. And so some people have to be placed into other jobs. And one of the things I would like to see is a multidisciplined task force as oversight, not currently working in the government, where they can, you scratch my back and I'll scratch yours, and here's a bit of money to keep quiet. No. Public accountability, where we get a truly transparent government, where the people themselves are involved. So, likes of some of these research centres, we get some of the scientists who have knowledge of what they're actually messing about with, go into these facilities and report back what's beneficial research for humanity, and should it continue, yes or no, and if it's not beneficial to humanity, do we need to make charges or press charges and then destroy it? But some of the research that has gone on is heinous beyond all imagination. And that's why we need, I would like to see Trump or whoever else goes into position employ public people with the skills required for the different tasks as oversight. So then the people who are in power, who haven't really got the time to be doing due diligence, and currently we have no oversight on the DOD, we have no oversight of FBI, we have no oversight of the CIA, none of the TSA or the DHS, because they're not part of America, is why. As they come back into being under the control of America and the real government, then there's a good suggestion for growth jobs. Oversight committees that are non-governmental. Is there a bank we can use that can't take your money? No. Some of the chartered banks are safe, and some of the credit unions, the main banks, are all bankrupt, and they declare emergency, you've lost all your funds. And people will argue, no, there's the insurance, except they were bankrupt 10 years ago and have never come back out of it. So don't fall for that. If you want evidence of what happened, remember and go back and research what happened when they did it in Iceland and shut all the banks down, and see if the people got the money back. They didn't. So that would be my advice. But I'm not. The state charter is outside of their control, from what I remember, anyway. When do you envision the UK getting on board as a sovereign? Not anytime soon. Sorry. They're in bed with the Mr. Burns's of this world, the Rothschilds. Not all, but too many. So I don't expect the UK to jump ship early on. They're not too happy over there that what's been done in this country. I hope the Kingdom of Manor, which is a country, is not the back door of the New World Order. Me too. Creating chaos and solution. I'm new to this info. My question is, what is... So, there's no guarantee, real guarantee. I'm not going to sit back and say America's going to be absolutely brilliant going forward, because we still got the same people in the country. Even if you remove the rogue elements, there's no saying that the people who step up don't become the same psychopaths. It's up to the people themselves to make and be the change. But there's no guarantee it's going to be the cure and fix for all, because we have to step up. And this is what I've kept saying in these shows. You can't carry on just relying on them to look after you and not have any input. You have to be the change. And, I think we were worthy of a chance without interference. But even now, I'm still seeing ego being a big issue and a big problem. And greed as well. People see the accounts as a chance to make bundles of money. If that's what you're thinking, then you really are not on the path to enlightenment or a better future. You're being self-centered, which is exactly the same mindset of the cabal. I mentioned the drug dealers. The poor black communities. There's drug dealers in the middle of them with vast quantities of money. Have they shared it amongst their own creed? No, they've kept it all to themselves. And then shoot people who dare to make some money off them. This is my turf. That's no different to the Rothschilds. Thinking everything belongs to the few. And this is why it's important that everyone changes the mindset of going forward. Because if we don't think and act different, we're going to repeat the same system. That's what the cabal have done. The system that was in place before, they copied. They didn't improve it, they copied it. And it failed. Because they haven't got the intelligence of the people who were in control before them. So we have to be better than what we are. I think we are. I think we're capable with a little bit of a hand up and an easing of the financial pressure. But, some people are complaining they're only earning 20,000, 30,000 a year. There's people who are living on $20 a month. There's no comparison. It's just we have kind of had things better, but we've also paid a heavy price for it, and that I will never forget. But they want to make everyone equal, but they don't want to make it where the way it was the American dream. They want to create the way it is in large parts of India, or most of Africa, or most of China. Abject poverty. That's their meaning of everyone equal. Not improving everyone's lifestyle. But let's be honest, the Western world has wasted the funds that we have had. And again, some people won't like that comment, but it is the truth. We have had more money, far more money than a lot of other people in other countries. And wasted it on buying cars and phones. That's just to impress friends. It's not the way to be. It's just not. Or spending $100, $200 on a stupid bag because it's got some bint off the TV's name on it. It's still a $10 bag. You've just paid 10, 20 times the amount for a name that's not even yours. It's giving your power away. Again. That the bag's better or the makeup's better because it's got Cindy Crawford's name on. Reality is most of these people who are selling these products don't even use them themselves. So we have to think better than that. We have to be better than that. So there is always a danger with unbalanced egos that we will create the same system. At that point, there'll be a reset. Because we'll just then proven what the Draco have said all along. We're incapable. Let's prove them wrong. What is meant by natural law and who decides what is natural law? We do. It's only 4 laws. All very simple. Thou shalt not injure, murder, harm or steal. They're the only laws you need. That's natural law. You abide by them for. Why do we need cops and courts? We need cops and courts that most people don't like because we don't behave ourselves. We injure people, we harm people, we murder people, and we steal. Not all of us, I admit. But too often people go down those routes. Too often also you could argue that that's because of the system, and I'll go along with that to a point. But it doesn't explain all of it. I've just realised it's 20 to 11. I'm probably going to end on that note. I was going to do a shorter show tonight. Oh boy. Apologies to the other dozen questions. United States controlled by the UK is under the City of London. British monarchs are not part of the City of London. They have to ask permission to go into the temple. World Trust, previously in the hands of the Crown of England. I'm not too sure on that. Maybe. I'm not 100% sure on it, is what I'm saying. But if it was under the Crown of England, then it's nothing to do with the Queen of England. It's to do with the Crown. Rothschilds play a role in that. So, hope that answers your 2 questions, and that's it. Right, at this point, I will be back next Tuesday and do that show with Ellen again about financial stuff and some of the history surrounding it. But if anything comes up, like it did, then I'll certainly do an announcement show. I expect that there will be more shows going forward as things develop. May get some real exciting shows as well. Wouldn't that be fun for us all? And all I will leave you on is progress has been made on many levels this week. But as yet, we're not putting out a date for the announcement. There is suggestions, but I'm not going to make any. We've been let down for far too long. It will be made. It's just a matter of time. Right. I hope you've enjoyed the show, and I'll be back on Tuesday. I think I'm going to have a weekend off. I would like to do that an evening with Thomas. I think Darrell Hibbert is on next. It should be really interesting. He's a real interesting guy. Maybe we'll hold that over till the following Sunday, and we'll go from there, and I can get some time for me and Chloe again. Poor Chloe's not had much time with me recently. I haven't had much time with myself, never mind with Chloe. But we're in exciting times and special times, and be nice to each other, you know. That's all it is. That doesn't cost nothing. It's fine to disagree. You're not here to follow me. We're here to help each other at the end of the day. And we need to be a lot more nicer to each other than we are currently in some cases. Right. Let's read that piece again. Maybe that then gives you an understanding. I read this on Tuesday. I haven't read it in a while on this show. But if you lead life in love and care, you will prevail. If you lead life in fear and anger, you will fail. And people are seeing evidence of that now. Feel free for you to be the person you wish to be, not the person who conforms to what others want them to be. Again, it's important. It's about you. You are a multi-dimensional being operating simultaneously on many levels. You are not here to conform. You are not here to be stifled. You are not here to be enslaved. And you are not here to be abused or to compete with your friends, family, or neighbours. That's a big one. You are here to be the best you can be and do so as a crown of creation. Now go out with the confidence of who and what you are and excel in yourself, and in doing so inspire others. This has been the Truth, Honour and Integrity Show. My name's Thomas Williams. Bye for now.